Recording in progress.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Thank you very much for joining us this evening and taking time out of your busy lives. So we really do appreciate that. You did hear that there's a recording and 4 times. That's because we have interpretation. So I'm going to go through a little bit of housekeeping here before we start the meeting. But first off, welcome to our meeting. Thank you for participating. We're here to discuss fumigation facilities in South Los Angeles County. We're here from the South Coast Air Quality Management District. We call ourselves South Coast AQMD. My name is Ian Macmillan. I am an Assistant Deputy Executive Officer in the Planning, Rule Development, and Implementation Division at South Coast AQMD. Before we begin, I do have some announcements. We offer 2 ways to participate in this meeting: by phone, teleconference, and also through Zoom, which most of you are here on. Both options include language support in English, Spanish, Tagalog, and Khmer. Let's move to the next slide. All right. So the following information is also on the screen for your convenience. If you wish to listen by telephone for all languages, please dial 1-669-900-6833. Can you get back to the second slide? Great, thanks. If you wish to listen by telephone to the meeting in Spanish, enter meeting ID number 932-0955-9643. If you wish to listen by telephone to the meeting in Tagalog, enter meeting ID number 923-1741-8056. If you wish to listen by telephone to the meeting in Khmer, enter meeting ID number 955-9353-9194. For those participating in the meeting via Zoom, it's critical for everyone to click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen that looks like a globe. Then select a language of your choice. Next slide. To view the slides in your preferred language, at the top center of your screen, you will see a drop-down menu where you can choose your desired language. Once selected, the slides will update to display in that language. There's a drop-down menu if you're watching through your cell phone. Next slide. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, you may call us at 909-396-2311 for assistance. We will now have an interpreter provide general meeting remarks in Spanish, Tagalog, and Khmer.
Gracias por su participación en la reunión pública del día de hoy para conversar sobre las instalaciones de fumigación en el Condado del Sur de Los Ángeles, dirigido por el Distrito de Administración de Aire de la Costa Sur. Yo soy Ian Macmillan, soy el subsecretario ejecutivo adjunto para la División de Planificación, Desarrollo e Implementación de Reglamentos. Antes de comenzar, tengo algunos anuncios. Ofrecemos 2 métodos para participar en la reunión: por teléfono, teleconferencia y mediante Zoom. Ambas opciones incluyen apoyo para los idiomas inglés, español, tagalo y khmer. La información a continuación también se presenta en la pantalla para su conveniencia. Si desea escuchar por teléfono en cualquiera de los idiomas, favor de marcar el 1-669-900-6833. Para escuchar la reunión por teléfono en español, introduzca el número de clave para la reunión 932-0955-9643. Si desea escuchar en el tagalo, 923-1741-8056. Y para Khmer, el 955-9353-9194. Para los que desean participar en la reunión por Zoom, es crucial que todos opriman el botón de interpretación ubicado en la parte inferior de su pantalla que parece un globo y luego seleccione su idioma. Para ver las diapositivas en su idioma preferido, en la parte superior central de su pantalla verá un menú desplegable de donde puede seleccionar su idioma. Una vez seleccionado, las diapositivas se actualizarán para aparecer en ese idioma. Si está usando su teléfono celular, habrá un menú desplegable a su disposición. Si está experimentando dificultades técnicas, nos puede llamar al 909-396-2311 para recibir asistencia. Gracias.
Okay, I think we have another translator that's going to come on. Perhaps our translator for Tagalog?
Ang sumusunod ay nasa screen din para sa kaginhawaan. Kung nais ninyo makinig sa telepono, para sa lahat ng wika, mangyaring i-dial ang 1669-900-6833. Kung nais makinig sa telepono sa pulong sa Tagalog, ilagay ang meeting ID number 923-1741-8056. Para sa mga nakikibahagi sa pulong sa pamagitan ng Zoom, critical para sa lahat na mag-click sa pindutan ng interpretasyon sa ibaba ng inyong screen na mukhang isang globo. Pagkatapos ay piliin ang Tagalog. Panghuli, upang tingnan ang mga slides sa inyong ginustong wika, tumingin lamang sa tuktok na sentro ng inyong screen, makakita ka ng isang drop-down menu kung saan maaari mong piliin ang iyong ninanais na wika. Kapag napili na, ang mga slide ay mag-update upang maipakita sa wikang iyon. Kung nakakaranas ka ng technical na paghihirap, maaari kang tumawag sa amin sa 909-396-2311 para sa tulong. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And now our interpreter for Khmer.
Okay, ទិវាសួស្តីខ្ញុំបាទឈ្មោះស៊ីណានូខ្ញុំអ្នកបកប្រែខ្មែរឲ្យខ្ញុំជាភាសាខ្មែរសូមបងប្អូនទាំងអស់សូមអញ្ជើញ
I'm sorry, can you speak closer to your microphone? I want to make sure everybody can hear you.
Okay, yeah, can you
Perfect.
hear me now? Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
រីត្រីសួស្តីខ្ញុំបាទឈ្មោះស៊ីណានូខ្ញុំជាអ្នកបកប្រែខាងភាសាខ្មែរបើបងប្អូនមានចង់ចូលរួមនៅក្នុងជួប Zoom សូមឲ្យចូលមកខាង Zoom ID meeting ហ្នឹងគឺលេខ955 9353 9194បើសិនណាជាបងប្អូនខ្មែរចង់ជួបក្នុងផ្នែកខាងទូរស័ព្ទ telephone conference សូមអញ្ជើញទូរស័ព្ទមកលេខ1 669 900 6833 ហើយកុំភ្លេចដាក់ភ្ជាប់នឹង ID ហ្នឹងគឺថាមានលេខ955 9353 សូមបើសិនណាជាអ្នកបងប្អូនមានបញ្ហាខាងបច្ចេកវិទ្យាក្នុងខាងមានបញ្ហាចូលភ្ជាប់នឹងគេហទំព័រនេះសូមបងប្អូនចុចរកទូរស័ព្ទខាងក្រោមដែលមានលេខ900 909សំទោសគេបាត់គេហទំព័រដែលបង្ហាញលេខខ្ញុំអត់ឃើញបើមានបញ្ហាអ្វីបាទសូមខលមកតាក់ទងទូរស័ព្ទខាងក្រោមនេះបាទសូមអរគុណ The slide. I cannot see the slide. Yes, I'm ready. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So continuing on, after the brief presentation by South Coast AQMD staff, we will open it up for public comment. We plan to keep most of the time tonight available for audience participation. Let's go to the next slide. If you have to leave early or have additional questions after the meeting, want to get more into the details, please join us during our upcoming office hours that we're going to be holding tomorrow and on Tuesday. So on Friday, March 21st from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. and Tuesday, March 25th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And staff will be available to answer any questions at that time beyond the time allocated tonight. Please be aware that this video conference meeting is being recorded. By participating in this meeting hosted by South Coast AQMD, you agree to authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD. Okay, so I think we're just about ready to get into the content here. I'd like to introduce two people I think you're going to hear from tonight. We do have other staff in attendance as well, and they can introduce themselves during the public comment and question portion as necessary. But first, I would like to introduce Dr. Quick. If you can turn your camera on, and we can have you do a brief background for yourself. There you are.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Quick. I am a physician and I'm a health effects consultant for South Coast Air Quality Management District.
Great, thank you. And I'm now going to turn to Dr. Scott Epstein to introduce himself and then run through the staff presentation.
Great, thanks, Ian. Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Epstein. I'm a planning and rules manager, and I oversee our air toxics hotspots program and our air quality assessment group at South Coast AQMD. And looks like we're ready to start. If you want to go to the next slide, please. All right. And just once again, if you're seeing the wrong language on the screen right now, you want to go up to the top of Zoom and you'll be able to select the tab that corresponds to your language. Okay, next slide, please. So the California Air Resources Board hosted a meeting in collaboration with other agencies, including us, at the end of January. This January meeting was to discuss elevated levels of a fumigant called methyl bromide that were detected at a monitor in West Long Beach. The monitoring was conducted in response to community concerns around fumigation facilities. So today's meeting is a follow-up of that meeting that was held 7 weeks ago. And we know not everybody here today was at that meeting. So we're going to review some of the material that was covered at that meeting and then provide a status update on those efforts. And then in the later half of the presentation, we're going to zoom out and look at all fumigation facilities in South LA County. So all of this is a work in progress, but we really wanted to get back to the community as soon as possible. Next slide, please. All right, so commodity fumigation is the fumigation of goods such as fruits or vegetables or lumber. And this type of fumigation is done at facilities near the ports of LA and Long Beach to control pests before and after shipping. So the LA County Agricultural Commissioner permits most of these facilities in LA County. South Coast AQMD, we permit 3 facilities under the federal Title V program. And the California Department of Pesticide Regulation regulates the use of these pesticides. Our initial investigation focused on 2 large facilities in West Long Beach, which are shown on the map on the right. So on the top is 3 Rivers Trucking, and their fumigator is known as AgFume. And then San Pedro Forklift on the bottom of this satellite image, and the fumigator there is known as SP Fume. Next slide. So exposure to fumigants can cause a whole variety of non-cancer health effects, but the dose is really important. So non-cancer health effects are not expected even in sensitive populations such as children, when the pollutant levels are below what we call the reference exposure level. So the reference exposure level is a threshold established by the best available health science. We use reference exposure levels that are established by the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, or you may have heard of it as OEHA. So when pollutant levels are above the reference exposure level, some people may possibly experience some health effects. There is a potential for health effects above this reference exposure level, but it's not necessarily a bright line or an on-off switch. However, the higher the pollutant levels are above the reference exposure level, the more likely the health effects become. So there are 4 fumigants that are used at facilities in LA County: methyl bromide, aluminum phosphide, magnesium phosphide, and sulfurofluoride. And exposure to fumigants above their reference exposure levels may cause a whole variety of health effects, and different fumigants have different health effects. So if you have any specific questions about the health effects of these fumigants, Dr. Quick, who introduced herself earlier, is here to answer any questions. Next slide. Okay, so CARB placed a monitor immediately downwind of these 2 fumigation facilities in West Long Beach. So we used a similar satellite image, but labeled it with, once again, these 2 facilities, Three Rivers Trucking, or Ag Fume, and San Pedro Forklift, or SP Fume. And you see on the upper right corner of this map, the CARB monitoring site. So this is very close to a monitor that we had deployed in 2018 and 2019, which I'll talk about on the next slide. And then for context, Hudson Elementary School is also on the map. So that sort of horizontal building above the Hudson Elementary School label is sort of the boundary of Hudson Elementary. And if you notice, there's this arrow indicating typical winds. So the typical winds in this area do blow from west to east. Okay, so the plot on the bottom shows the average monthly levels of methyl bromide that were measured at this CARB monitor. So this is largely the same data that was presented at the CARB meeting 7 weeks ago, but we added some additional data from June up until February. So for this pollutant in this situation, we're most concerned about chronic or long-term exposures. So if you take the average of these 2 years of data and you compare it to this reference exposure level that we talked about on the last slide, the average is roughly 1.5 times higher. So this ratio of the concentration that we measure and the reference exposure level is called the hazard index. And hazard indices that are above 1 indicate that health impacts could be possible because the levels are above the reference exposure level. So we're not showing it here, but the data is collected hourly. And when looking at that data, we see that the elevated levels typically occur at night from 6 p.m. to midnight. And that's because that's when the fumigation is occurring. So this slide was made a few weeks ago when we only had data through the end of February. There is some newer data from March on the CARB fumigation website, and it shows that March levels are up from February, but they're lower than the 2024 February and March levels. Next slide.
Scott, I apologize. I'm going to break in really quick. I see there's a question in the Q&A, and it gets to one of the things you said in the beginning about how to work through Zoom. So there's a question asking about seeing slides in a different language, but hearing in English. So there's a tab, multiple tabs at the top of the screen, and you can select the language that you want to view there. So you'll see it's English, Tagalog, Khmer, and Spanish. So you can click which language you want to view the slides. And then the globe icon is where you can select the audio that works for you. So I just wanted to make sure everybody heard that again who's just joining. Sorry to interrupt, Scott. Go ahead.
No problem. Thanks, Ian. Okay, so what does this mean to the community? So I want to put this in context by talking about our multiple air toxics exposure study. So this is a very resource-intensive study that we conduct every 5 to 7 years or so, where we measure roughly 100 different air toxics at 10 locations throughout the region. One of those includes methyl bromide. So the locations that we do these intensive measurement studies are shown in the upper right map. So in this 5th MATE study, which I'm going to talk about here, 2 of the 10 stations were in Long Beach, one of which was very close to this CARB monitor, and directly downwind of these two fumigation facilities. We saw generally low levels of methyl bromide throughout the entire region. The exception was that methyl bromide levels at the West Long Beach monitor were elevated, but these levels were not actionable as they did not exceed the reference exposure level or any of our regulatory thresholds. So the plot on the bottom right illustrates that. So we're showing the hazard index on the y-axis. This is what I introduced before. This is the ratio of the pollutant level divided by the reference exposure level. And the CARB monitor that took measurements from 2023 to 2025 is on there showing a hazard index of 1.5. The nearby West Long Beach monitor, which is very similar location, different time period, 2018 to 2019, had a hazard index of 0.9. So this is a level where no health impacts are expected. So since MATES looks at 100 different air toxics, we can determine what the health risk is from all toxic pollutants in the area and not just from methyl bromide. So that's what this blue bar shows over here. So the hazard index at the West Long Beach monitor from all toxic pollutants that we measure, including methyl bromide, was 5.8. And for context, when we look at these other 9 stations, those hazard indices range from between 4.5 on the low end to 8 on the high end, with an average of around 5.5. Next slide. Okay, so we talked about monitoring data, and monitors are really good for getting accurate measurements of risk in a specific location, but they're really resource intensive. They can take a while to get long-term averages, and they're not ideal for capturing risk throughout an entire community. The Department of Pesticide Regulation has done some modeling of the area where the risk from methyl bromide could lead to health impacts. So this is the area around the CARB monitor. So the map on the upper right was presented at the last meeting 7 weeks ago. And just to give you a sense of scale, so once again, we labeled the 2 facilities, Three Rivers Trucking and San Pedro Forklift, or Ag Fume and SP Fume. We labeled the CARB monitor as current monitor. We also labeled the monitor for MATES as 2018 and 2019 monitor, and Hudson Elementary School on the map. So this blue region, I want you to focus on. So this blue region is the area where the hazard index exceeds 1, or where health effects are possible. So within the blue region, it is possible that some people may have health effects from methyl bromide exposure. This includes roughly 50 homes and sort of a block or 2. We also put a satellite image on the left side of this slide to show how this blue area fits in with the larger community. So just to orient you, the 710 goes vertically across the right side of the image. The 405 goes horizontally across the top of the image. The blue region, that sort of teardrop shape, is right in the middle of the satellite image. We also put on nearby schools as these green stars. So this gives you a sense of how this area where we do have elevated risk fits in with the larger Long Beach area. We've also done some analysis to compare the impacts of these 2 facilities to other typical sources of air toxics that people would be familiar with. So for example, when we compare the risk from these facilities to our action thresholds, it's roughly similar to the risk that you would see in the parking lot around a large gas station. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we showed you the data. Now we want to talk about actions. So these are the actions that have already been taken to address risk from these facilities. So the facilities agreed to some voluntary measures with the LA County Agricultural Commissioner to reduce the impact on the community. And the Ag Commissioner enshrined these measures into their permits, essentially making them mandatory. So some of those measures, they can't conduct fumigation during school hours. they've always used stacks to exhaust the methyl bromide high into the air after they're done using it. They've increased their stack heights as part of this new permit, which allows the methyl bromide to disperse better and reduces the methyl bromide levels at breathing level. They've also imposed measures to reduce risk, and they set up an arrangement so that the two facilities coordinate their activities so that they don't fumigate at the same time. At South Coast AQMD, we implemented our air toxics hotspots program, which applies to all different types of facilities that emit air toxics in our jurisdiction. We required comprehensive emission reporting, detailing all of the toxic emissions coming from these two facilities. So these reports were submitted in early March, and they're currently undergoing review. Based on the results of the report, the facilities may be required to do health risk assessments. So these health risk assessments involve detailed computer modeling that evaluate the risk throughout the entire community. And based on the results of these health risk assessments, additional risk reduction may be required under our existing rule, Rule 1402. Next slide, please. Okay, so far what we've shown is a review of the information that was presented at the CARB meeting 7 weeks ago. From this point on, we're going to provide new information. So we wanted to zoom out and look at all of the fumigation facilities in the region. And the LA County Agricultural Commissioner helped us identify other fumigation facilities. So these are not only facilities that use methyl bromide, but they use other fumigants as well. So we use criteria that we use throughout our entire air toxics program to help prioritize facilities and determine which ones may pose a risk to the surrounding communities. So we reached out to these facilities to get their usage data. We also looked at the toxicity of the fumigants that they're using, how far each of these facilities is to nearby residents and businesses, and take into account the local meteorology. This is the same methodology that we use for prioritizing all different types of facilities that emit air toxics throughout our program. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide shows a map of the 18 fumigation facilities that were identified in South LA County. And not all these facilities are created equal. So just to orient you, the port complex is at the middle bottom of the map, and the 91 freeway goes horizontally across the top of the map. So each fumigation facility has a marker that corresponds to the legend on the map. We took a look at 2022 emissions. And the reason why we focused on 2022 is that there's a statewide program that requires emissions reporting every 4 years. So these facilities were required to report their 2022 emissions for the first time. So we had the most complete data for 2022. That being said, we're also looking at subsequent years, 2023 and 2024, but this is the most ready to present. So there are 6 facilities shown with green circles that didn't use any fumigants in 2022. So 3 of them are down close to the ports, and 3 of them are in this cluster in Carson. The yellow diamond indicates facilities that did use fumigants, but we don't expect any offsite impacts from their usage. So 2 of these facilities are in this Carson cluster. One is along the 710 just north of the 405, and one is in this cluster of 4 facilities in West Long Beach, almost in the center of the map. So in that cluster, you'll also see 2 orange triangles. These are ag fume and SP fume that we talked about earlier in the presentation. So the orange triangles indicate facilities that could potentially have offsite impacts and that are required to submit comprehensive emission report under our air toxics hotspots program. So as mentioned earlier, based on that, a health risk assessment and risk reduction may also be required. There are also 4 other orange triangles. So one is at the top of the map in Compton, and 3 are down in the port complex. There are 2 facilities with blue squares. So these are facilities that use sulfuryl fluoride. And OEA has not developed any cancer or non-cancer health reference levels for us to use for sulfuryl fluoride. So that's why they say fumigant used has no established toxicity criteria. One of these facilities is in this Carson cluster, and the other one is in West Long Beach. Next slide, please. Okay, so this table shows the same information as on the map, except we provided addresses and put the total fumigant used for each facility. So just to remind everyone, the category that we assign to each facility is not only based on usage, but it's also based on proximity to nearby residents and businesses, toxicity to the fumigant, and local meteorology. Next slide. Okay, so we talked a lot about potential impacts tonight. Now we want to talk about where things are going and what actions we're taking in the future. So first, methyl bromide monitoring is going to continue to help us evaluate the impacts of these new permit conditions at AgFume and SBFume in West Long Beach. South Coast AQMD is developing an interactive data display so that the public can view levels in real time, similar to what we have for other monitoring programs. We're also continuing to evaluate impact from all fumigation facilities in the region. As I said earlier, this is a work in progress. There's several staff members work on these issues on a daily basis. As I also mentioned, there's 6 facilities that we showed with the orange triangles on the map have been required to submit these detailed emission inventories under our Air Toxics Hotspots program. A health risk assessment evaluating the risks that are posed to the community may be required. And depending on the results of that health risk assessment, these facilities may be required to implement controls to reduce risk. Next slide, please. So just to continue these upcoming actions, we're having ongoing internal discussions as to whether or not a rule is an appropriate mechanism to address risk from these facilities. So we know there are a lot of facilities. If there's a systemic issue that's identified, a rule may be appropriate. Also, there's an existing memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, between the LA County Ag Commissioner and South Coast AQMD that was written in the mid-90s that establishes each agency's permitting responsibilities. So this came out of state legislation that was aimed to streamline permitting across agencies. So we're looking hard and exploring the future role of this MOU to see if any modifications are needed. In addition, we're going to continue to provide info about this process and what we find going forward. So as I mentioned, this is a work in progress, and we hope to have a website up soon at the link on this slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so we finally made it to the public discussion and questions part of the presentation. So if you have any questions or comment, or you want to give a comment, you can raise your virtual hand or use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. So as Ian mentioned earlier, we're hosting these virtual office hours tomorrow and on Tuesday. So the way it'll work is a few of us are going to hang out in this virtual Zoom room where you can drop in and out with any in-depth questions or comments that you want to discuss with us. We have QR codes for those Zoom meeting links. The links are also on the screen, and we can also put them in the Q&A as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you have any additional questions or concerns that aren't answered at this meeting or during office hours, or just need to get in touch with us, we've provided 2 contacts on this slide. So Sarah Reese is the Deputy Executive Officer of the Planning, Rule Development, and Implementation Division, and Lisa Tanaka is the Deputy Executive Officer and Public Advisor of the Legislative Public Affairs and Media. And now I'll hand it back over to Ian.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. I appreciate it. So there's a lot of information that we just provided here, and I'm sure people are all still digesting. I see that there are some questions that are coming in on the Q&A. I also see that some hands are raised. So we are in the public comment and question portion. Just a couple quick announcements before we get started in that. Of course, we're going to ask that make all comments with courtesy and civility and respect. Any profanity or discriminatory comments are prohibited. Any violation of the above rules can result in your mic being muted or you being dropped from the meeting. I don't anticipate we're going to need a timer unless we start to see a whole bunch of hands go up right now. I don't think we're going to put a timer on. I think we have time to get through comments and questions. I will say, so if you're in Zoom, please click on the gray raise your hand button at the bottom of the screen, which looks like a hand. If you're on the teleconference line, please dial *9 and you will be recognized in turn. And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and go to the hands that are raised as I see them on my screen. So the first hand, Chris Chavez, see your hand is up. Do you have questions or comments you'd like to make?
Sure, thank you. Chris Chavez, this is my apologies for any background noise. I'm actually out walking in the neighborhood. I'm work for Coalition for Clean Air, but also I'm a West Long Beach resident in the Wrigley neighborhood. Just one thing I am curious about. So earlier you mentioned, or the presentation mentioned, that the levels were not actionable. Could you talk a little bit more about what that means, what an actionable level is, and whether that prevents things from being considered like a notice of violation or more punitive actions against these sorts of emission releases?
Yeah, great question. I can understand why that's a little confusing because we talked about a lot of actions, or Scott mentioned a lot of actions that we are taking that are underway and are going to be happening in the future as we continue along. But there are some actions that we have thresholds that we put into our air toxics program. So in our air toxics program, and that's sort of its own piece, some thresholds require facilities to provide us more information. Additional thresholds require them to provide a report showing health risks in a community. Thresholds that are even higher show that there's risks that are high enough that the facility needs to reduce their risks down below threshold. And then thresholds are even higher where they need to accelerate their process and really get to rapid risk reduction because the risks are so high. So we have a series of thresholds in our air toxics program. But there's other actions that we're undertaking already that Scott mentioned, as far as monitoring, as far as working with a lot of other agencies, gaining a lot of information already from these facilities, looking at other actions that maybe we would do outside of the air toxics program. But we have within air toxics program itself, there are thresholds in there that are actionable. I want to check really quick with Scott to make sure I'm capturing that accurately. And then also after Scott, we'll go back to Chris to see if that answered your question.
Yeah, that sounded good to me. Thanks.
Okay. Chris, did that answer your question?
In a way, I think I understand in the sense. So again, I think in terms of some of the more, like I said, kind of corrective action, certainly appreciate what has been taken already, but that kind of shows staff at this time isn't considering anything more than in terms, again, like NV or fines or anything along those lines.
At this stage, we don't actually have any notices of violation or anything like that have been issued for any of these facilities. These facilities are permitted by the LA County Agricultural Commissioner. So if there's any enforcement actions, it's typically through the permitting agency. And so that would be anything that the Agricultural Commissioner has done. But for AQMD, there's nothing that's teed up right now. And there's other staff here from our compliance division that can correct me if I have that wrong. I'm sorry, Chris, did you say something?
Oh, I was actually going to say, I appreciate you mentioning that this was the fee jurisdiction or fine jurisdiction would be under the Agricultural Commissioner. That kind of adds an extra layer for consideration. So I do appreciate that. I think just as a general comment, Certainly, there's a lot of environmental justice concerns in this neighborhood, in this region, between all the different sources. Why there is a lower quality of life and lower life expectancy in the western side of Long Beach and the eastern. One thing I would hope that comes to be, if there are city staff on this call or engaged in this process, is looking at things like incompatible land uses, which is something I know the city of LA is also looking at right now. But I will leave my comments there, and thank you for this information, and see you at Stationary Source tomorrow.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I think you're referring to some board committee meetings that we have coming up tomorrow on different topics. So appreciate you calling in here. I'm going to go to the next hand I see raised on my screen. Sylvia B.
Hi, good evening. This is Sylvia Betancourt. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, Sylvia. Good hearing you.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation. There's a lot of information here to wrap my head around and lots of questions to ask, but I will drill down to about, I think on the topic of the health risk assessment and the homes that you identified as the highest risk on one of your slides. I wanted to ask, how did you determine that those were the that those were the highest risk, and how did that exclude others? That, given that this is an environmental justice community with cumulative impacts, families with children and adults, elders who have already health issues and other vulnerabilities, that exposure to an air toxic might increase that vulnerability. How did you determine that? And then second is the health risk assessment. Could you please talk a little more about what that would entail? I know your statement was it may be required, so it sounds like it is not an absolute, but wanted to know more about that, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for those two questions there, Sylvia. Scott, I might ask you to address these.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the question. So the way that we can determine what the risk is in the broader community is by using computer models. So there are these very well-established computer models that are used all throughout the US. Department of Pesticide Regulation actually has done some modeling. That's the modeling we showed in the slide with the blue kind of teardrop shape. And that uses these very well-established computer models. You plug into the model the emissions that are coming from the facility and kind of the geometry, the stacks, and kind of where all the emissions are coming from. And the model takes into account meteorology and then calculates what the levels of pollutant are at every location in the model. And then from that, you can compare that to these reference exposure limits or levels, and then determine which areas could potentially have health impacts. So a very similar strategy is done in health risk assessment. Those are done by the facilities themselves, and then we very carefully audit, check, review their analysis, and then it also goes to OEHA for them to evaluate it.
Actually, can I also have Dr. Quick, if you're there? I think there's some of the things that Scott talked about as far as looking at the pollutant levels. And one of the things that I heard Sylvia asking is, well, why these homes, understanding that there's different kinds of populations and demographics and different considerations for different kinds of populations, and thinking about the reference exposure levels that are used and health protective, like, talk through that a little bit if you can.
Sure. Thank you. Great question. I think what's most important to know about these reference exposure levels is that they are designed to be very health protective. And what that means is that they are taken take into consideration sensitive populations, children, and even pregnant women. And essentially what this is saying is these reference exposure levels are meant to be very health protective, so that anything under that is essentially not going to be expected to cause any health impact. And even if one of those reference exposure levels is exceeded, that doesn't mean that there's going to be health effects related to it. They're set at an area that has a safety margin and really taking into account those special and sensitive populations. So I think that to the point of how this modeling works and how you determine sort of the area, you heard Scott give a great explanation of how that is done. And then the levels that we point back to for any determination of action or potential health risk are really meant to be health protective.
Thanks. And then just circling back, I think, Sylvia, your second question was asking when is a health risk assessment required? And so, Scott, can you just very briefly go through that?
Yeah, so our air toxics hotspots program has sort of a level steps that goes through the program. So first we look at the initial emissions from these facilities. And then we do this prioritization that I talked about in the slide deck, where we look at kind of nearby areas, we look at emissions, meteorology, and if that kind of gets above a certain threshold, then we require these facilities to submit this comprehensive air toxics inventory. And then once we get that, we take this new data, which is really refined and audited and well established, and then we check again and see, do we expect to see significant offsite impacts? And if that's the case, if they're above a threshold, then we will then require a health risk assessment.
Sylvia, did that answer your questions? I don't know if you have follow-ups.
I think if you, maybe I didn't hear it, but I think I'm thinking about vulnerable populations. And so if you have children, I think Dr. Quick did reference pregnant women, some sensitive populations, just thinking about, well, you have this modeling of the air toxics, but when you're thinking about the population that is being exposed, is already vulnerable, how are you going to determine this health risk assessment? How would you know that that there is risk or not if you've not assessed the population, if you haven't reached out to them? Just, you know, if you can just clarify that, and I will stop there. Thank you.
Great. Maybe I'll take that one. Appreciate it. So I think what Dr. Quick was referring to was that these health thresholds and these health levels are really, in some ways, looking at the most sensitive members of the population and meant to be protective of not those who are less sensitive to these kinds of pollutant exposures, but the most sensitive, right? And that are most susceptible to risk, whether it's children or the elderly or pregnant women, et cetera, that it's really designed to protect those wherever they live, whether they live on this block or that block. And so it's really designed to be that most health protective. That's what the thresholds are all set at, taking that into account. Is that right, Dr. Quick?
Yes, I think so. And I think the one thing I will add is I think maybe the question is, without looking at those 50 homes and who lives in them, how do we know that these levels will be protective of those? And that's really based on sort of how these levels are developed, taking into account what we know about sensitive populations sort of across the board. So that's done on the back end to make sure that these, you know, levels are set to be protective of populations across the sort of across the population spectrum, including these particularly sensitive populations.
Okay. Sylvia, if you have other questions, or anybody as we get through initial questions, feel free to raise your hand again and we'll come back to people at the end. So there's no follow-up on that, not seeing you come off mute. So we'll keep going. I see the next hand is, I apologize if I get anybody's name incorrect here. Carlos Ovalle? Looks like you have your hand raised.
Thank you. That's the correct pronunciation. I appreciate that.
Great.
So I was at the last presentation at the Salvation Army, a couple of neighborhoods away from the west side where this problem is occurring. At that presentation, there was there seemed to be an emphasis on the school closure and the offset between the school schedule and the release of toxics. At the same time, there was an emphasis on data that indicated that there was little or no cancer risk from these toxics being released. But almost as a footnote, that yes, there was a risk of, I think they call it neurological system failure. So for many decades, I'm an old guy, 67, and for many decades, the tobacco industry made presentations basically saying tobacco is safe. They were often backed by government officials, government agencies, for a long time. And in my work as an environmentalist, I've encountered similar attitudes from various agencies whose mandate is to protect my neighbors and I. So, pardon me, but I feel like I'm kind of listening to the tobacco industry again, telling me that tobacco is safe. That's the feeling I get. Meanwhile, I have to live with cancer. I have to live with neurological conditions, endocrinology disorders, and asthma. None of it is hereditary. It's all, according to the specialists that I see, a matter of the environment. So, in the end, it it really feels like those of us who live in Western Long Beach, who are subject to all of these toxics, and I'm not just talking about this particular issue that we're discussing here, but everything else that we see here, from the port, from the incinerator, from the refineries, from the freeway, etc. It feels like that we are subsidizing industry with our lives. My conditions cause, things that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Issues like sleep deprivation, sleeping 1.5 to 2 hours a night, with the associated consequences of prolonged sleep deprivation. That's just obviously one of the health issues that I suffer, and I'm not the only one. I just have to walk my block without crossing the street, and I see all sorts of stuff. I mean, Chris Chavez earlier mentioned the life expectancy, which all of you know. Our life expectancy is 5 to 10 years. In some cases, even 15 years less than wealthier and pardon me, but wider areas of Long Beach in the eastern side of Long Beach. So, I'm not just looking at this particular pollutant. I'm looking at the big picture, and how we are feeling slighted by, in this case, the South Coast Air Quality Management District and all our government officials, basically. So extremely disappointed. And the solutions that I hear, I mean, okay, we're going to build a smokestack higher. It's not stopping the release of these chemicals. It's just releasing them higher in the air by what, 10, 20, 30, 40 feet, it's still covering our neighborhood. The wind patterns as well as I do. So how do you address that to us, who are suffering?
Well, Carlos, let me first say, certainly I think you're expressing better than any of us could sort of any of the concerns about cumulative impacts in, this community. I think, we're aware of them, but, those there are living them. And the health effects that you're experiencing, the health problems that you're experiencing, or your neighbors or whomever, that's very difficult, and really appreciate that you're sharing something like that. I think, what I might ask is, I think one of the things that we have presented here are a series of actions. It's sort of a status update. I mean, you were at the last meeting, you're here at this meeting. We're continuing to not just track this, but to try to develop the actions that we're going to be doing here. And we'll have continual follow-up on this. And as we learn more and there's other actions that we need to take, we plan to do that. We have systems in place to make sure that we are protecting public health. That is part of our mission. We're a public health agency, an air quality agency, and that is what all of our actions are designed to do, to protect public health. And so, I think that's where we're trying to look at this within that system of all of the programs that we have that are designed to protect public health. How does this fit in? And let's, take those necessary actions. I heard a few concerns that you have, but I want to try to see, I think one of the things that we've heard at the last meeting, and I heard some of what you said about, still allowing the pollutants to be emitted here. One solution that we hear at some places is, what can be done to control the emissions? And that's where I think it's looking at what are the standards that can be put in place. And what is the appropriate level of control, and looking at this facility, another facility, any other facility, what is that appropriate level of control? And I think that's what we're going through right now, of looking through that analysis. What is the appropriate level of control that is designed to protect public health? Looking at how do we treat this community so that it's not treated any less than any other community? And so I think we're going through that exercise right now. But I don't know if you have other or specific suggestions, and this is for anybody that wants to speak or comment. The suggestions on different things maybe we should be looking at. I think that might be helpful to hear.
Well, I don't know. Can you still hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I'm not an expert on methyl bromide or on the fumigation of the goods that are being brought into the country, but from a quick Google search, it appears that there are alternatives, and these alternatives, although they may not be as cost effective as methyl bromide, they exist, and that's why I feel like we're subsidizing industry with our lives, because what is being considered acceptable to you all at the South Coast Air Quality Management District and similar agencies is out of concern for them, not for us. Why address those emissions? Why not stop the emissions altogether? Stop the use of those chemicals and rely on alternative methods. And that's all I have.
I appreciate that. That's something we'll take back. We'll talk to the Ag Commissioner and DPR about that. I don't want to make any promises one way or the other, but it's a good comment. It's something we can take action on, and we can talk to some of those agencies. So appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to go to the next hand I see. Thurl Golden, I see your hand is up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
Okay. I'm here with a group, and it's a few questions, and a couple people are going to be using my name again to ask other questions. But the first question is, for the health impact study, or your current data, does it illustrate cumulative impacts on these people in this particular area? They have been there, and from talking to the two owners, they've been fumigating at these two locations for nearly 50 years. Some of that time, there was no real, everything was done outdoors almost, from my understanding. So with that, to me, that means a health impact study should be more forthcoming than less because of the time period. And I don't know if the data you collected includes that or don't. And one of my guests want to know if you have a clean air plan for us to have clean air all the time. One more, Carlos was just mentioned eliminating the threat to the community. Because however the lower the level is, it's still a threat. There's technologies out there that can eliminate this particular threat. In some instances, it may not be that, but at least in this instance, it can be. And health is the most important to all these. And there's a lot of sensitive receptors in and around these areas. And one of the guests we have here wanted to know about when you're outdoor sports the kids play in the late evening, especially this time of year. Although it is seasonal, but it still happens that they are outdoors at either the park, Hudson Park in that particular area, over here at Silverado Park. They still have exposure. So that's quite a bit.
Okay, thanks, Daryl. Do appreciate those questions. Maybe I'm trying to write notes on what you were saying to just get through them. So you talked about the long history of these two facilities, and the information that we have. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott. I think it's mainly from 2022, and we're starting to get a little bit more data from subsequent years as well. So we don't really have that longer emissions data. Or usage data. We don't have that, kind of going back that long history that you described. So anything that we would do would really be a look forward, looking at the data we have now and then looking forward, but looking forward for long periods of times, over decades. That's the assumption. It's not just that, oh, it's here and then it goes away after 1 year. So that's what we have right now. Your question about clean air all the time. We do have plans. Air quality management plan is the main blueprint that looks at addressing air quality across the entire region, but that really looks at certain pollutants. It wouldn't look necessarily at methyl bromide on these localized toxics. We have other programs that look at toxics, cumulative impacts from toxics. One is the MATES study that Scott mentioned. That looks at a cumulative assessment of toxics. We've had other programs like the Community Emission Reduction Program, our plans as part of our AB 617 that looks more at community level and what are some actions that can occur at the community level. There's other kinds of actions that we do too, but I think what we've seen is that through time, through these MATE studies, toxics risks and the level of pollutants in the air have been dropping down consistently, and that is really encouraging. Is it enough? No, we need to keep going, right? And I think all of these actions that we've taken in the past give us a guide. We need to keep going and keep taking those actions to reduce emissions. So I think there's a number of pieces that are in place to keep cleaning up the air, but there's still work to do. On the outdoor sports and outdoor exposures, I don't know, Dr. Quick, if you want to talk a little bit about some of the outdoor exposure and thinking about the levels that we're seeing, and is there anything we should be thinking about with outdoor exposures?
Yeah, great question. I think one thing I'm going to sort of touch upon again that was mentioned earlier in the presentation, the levels that we're looking at now are, when we're thinking about those, it's in the context of sort of chronic ongoing exposure and not acute levels that would cause like something that we would say at acute level that might cause an immediate health risk, and we'd want folks to take like individual actions. So related to thinking about being outdoors and walking in the neighborhood, being outside and completing sports, we're not asking for any individual change in activity right now related to this. Essentially, we're seeing levels that essentially looking at the sort of risk there, we're talking about a chronic one and not an immediate. So really not asking for any individual change in activities right now for people.
Okay, thank you for that. I see hands are still raised. So again, for everybody. Oh, go ahead, Daryl.
Two follow-up questions. In the May study, does it include methyl bromide as one of the pollutants? How is it being tracked?
Indeed, yeah, it is included. We did monitor in West Long Beach and Scott presented some of those results. And we do plan to continue that in the next MATE study, which is just kicking off right around this time frame now. We're just about to start that, and we're going to be including methyl bromide in this next iteration as well.
Okay, and the next person, come on.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm really thankful that y'all three are here to answer our questions. I live in Westside Long Beach. I've been to the AQMD before. I live across from the 710 freeway. One of my questions is the land use element for Hudson Elementary School, considering that we've recently gone through rezoning in Westside Long Beach. What are the chances that Hudson School can be turned into a future truck depot with the land there, considering that the school is shutting down? My other question is, we're about to build, or our city is planning to build the TI Freeway Park right near the Hudson site. Is there a way you can put one of the air monitors there before our city invests millions and millions of dollars into another park that's going to deplete our fire and ambulance services from our neighborhood, that we could really get a clear idea of the air there before we build? Thank you.
So Emily, thanks for the question. So the question about Hudson Elementary School and what's going to happen to that land, I think that's really a question for the Long Beach Unified School District. They're the one that owned the school and would determine whatever comes next with that. I haven't heard of any plans for that, but I'm also not living right there, and maybe there's other conversations happening that we might not be aware. But that is something that I think would be more for Long Beach Unified School District. I think that we have been talking to them just in general about all of this topic. So we have points of contact there. We can pass that question along. And then as far as air monitoring at the park, can you say which park you were talking about again? I just want to make sure I understand the location. We have a lot of monitoring around, and we're trying to make sure I understand that location.
Okay, so it's where the TI freeway exits from San Pedro and the port, and they consider it a area that no one uses, and they want to tear down that piece there. I'd say it was south of Hudson. I'm not sure how many acres is. It's a really large area, and how do we request the monitors to be put there for collection so our community can really understand what would we be approving?
Okay, so are you talking about the potential project of turning the TI freeway into a park?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure which one you were talking about there.
Thank you.
That one, I know that there's been some conversations that the city, I think, has been having over the last several years. I don't know if that project is fully approved or going forward, but I think that's something we can take back to talk to the city and see, what plans are in place there, if that project's going forward or not. So that's something we can take back.
Thank you.
Okay.
Before you leave, we want to thank you. I believe we have all of the questions answered at this time. So if we need to come back, my hand will pop back up.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it, Daryl. I'm going to go ahead and keep going here with the hands that I see raised. So next one is Antonio Ruiz. I see your hand raised.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, the question I have is, are there any I'm already proximities that these companies are from schools, and do you have any measures, unlike the refineries when they have a flare? We see them and we can notify schools, to shelter in place, especially elementary schools or kindergarten schools for the children for exposure. Do you have any measures to protect schools from exposures? I was looking at your map and the one you showed, it shows all these schools around these companies, and you show like a small plumage that's blue. Do these plumages get bigger where they do engulf these schools? And are there any precautions to, prevent exposure to children, especially the small ones that, it's very hard to perform studies on when they're that small. So, mainly, what proximities exist for these companies to do business with like methyl bromide and other, agents around schools with potential exposure to children?
Right. Yeah, very good question. One of the reasons that we wanted to show the maps and at different scales, sort of zoomed in really
Yeah.
close and then zoomed way out, is we wanted to really highlight, one of the things we wanted to highlight there were the schools. Where are those schools located, and where is this impact area? Because West Long Beach means a lot of things to a lot of people. And so what we wanted to do is to really show where is this area where we think there's potentially an exceedance of a reference exposure level, and then where exactly are the schools. And everything that we've seen so far in that area, that sort of blue teardrop area, everything we've seen so far, that would be the maximum extent from everything we know from both facilities of where we would expect potential impacts. And that doesn't reach any school. So
Okay.
everything outside of that blue zone, we would not expect to have any health impacts from methyl bromide, including with children, right? The most sensitive populations, we're not expecting any health impacts at Hudson, which is the closest school. You've got Stevens nearby, you've got Cabrillo, you've got Webster, you've got a lot of other schools right around there. And those are all farther away than Hudson. So we don't expect any impacts on any of the schools. We have been in communication with the school district officials to make sure that we can answer any questions to them directly one-on-one. And we've been talking to them to make sure that if there are any concerns, they can come directly to us and on that. But we're just trying to provide this information right now of where we see the impacts. And we just want to be as transparent as possible. Where do we see these schools and what is that impact? So right now we're not seeing anything. And I'll ask Dr. Quake, do you see, am I getting anything wrong on that?
No, I think that is a great explanation. Nothing to add.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Antonio. Next hand I see is Rabina Sewell. Let's see here, there we go. You have questions or comments you'd like to make?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Rabina Sewell. I'm the Executive Director of California Safe Schools and the co-coordinator of the Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network. I think it's important to remember and restate that methyl bromide is a fumigant. It's a colorless, odorless gas. It's a highly toxic pesticide. The United Nations, through the Montreal Protocol, addresses methyl bromide as an ozone depleter, and it's banned in Europe. And I think something that hasn't been discussed tonight is that there are alternatives to methyl bromide that are currently available. Tonight's AQMD, you showed a 2022 map with 18 fumigation facilities, but the map is 3 years old. What do today's 18 site emission data reveal? Please, can you share that with everyone after the meeting? That would be wonderful. Thank you. And then currently, there is only one monitor. I've heard you mention that with the new mates coming up, there may be additional, but for now you have 600, possibly more residents, homeowners. You have school children. You have a park, and there are other sensitive receptors. And there are plans to add these additional monitors, and when will they be added and how quickly, please, can they be added? The question I have also, Ian and Dr. and Scott, is, when it comes to pesticide, the label dictates the protocols. And methyl bromide has a lot of stipulations with them. And we will, at California Safe Schools, continue to submit public record requests for these records regarding the label and other records, and really sincerely hope that some of them, or all of them, hopefully can be provided soon. In my role as Executive Director of California Safe Schools, and frankly, really long before I've even worked on these issues formally, I witnessed way, way too many funerals of innocent, vulnerable children and families who were unknowingly guinea pigs for environmental toxic releases. And so my request this evening is that there be immediate, ongoing, real-time monitoring for these very vulnerable, sensitive populations that are so close nearby. And I thank you for your continued interest in communicating with the community, and hopefully there will be more discussions as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rubina, and I appreciate your comments here and engaging with us, outside of this as well. So I just I'm trying to jot little notes down on the question about the map. You'd mentioned that the map is showing 2022 data. Well, the table shows 2022 data. Scott, can you touch on? We're continuing to collect some data, and so Scott did say this is a work in progress. We're going to continue as we get more information. We'll provide that. But Scott, can you touch on the map and the facilities there, and that issue about 2022 versus through now?
Yeah, sure. So the map is built with 2022 data, but it was created like 3 weeks ago. So it is a new map with older data. And the reason why we first focused on 2022 is that is the first year that these facilities were required to submit their usage or their emissions to comply with a California state regulation. So the 2022 data was the easiest to get as quickly as we could. And we're in the process of gathering 2023 and 2024 data just to kind of see how things have progressed over the years. But like we said, this is a work in progress. Like 2022 is the most complete data set we had. So that's what we're presenting now.
Okay. And then a couple other things. One, I heard, Rubina, you mentioned 600 residents. I don't think we've looked at exactly how many residents, but it's about 50 homes. So roughly about 50 homes, and the residential population, in there. On the monitoring, we are continuing the monitoring. That is continuing at that site, which we think is that maximum impact for what we would expect from these facilities. When you look downwind and where the winds are blowing, it seems to be right in that sort of perfectly aligned trajectory. And so we do plan to continue that monitoring. We do plan to provide that information on our website. I think one of the things that we're really looking at is making sure we understand, in particular, looking at new permit conditions from these facilities, or that are imposed on these facilities now, that how does this affect those monitored levels? We're seeing right now, we're going into the peak season. We know traditionally this is the peak season for when produce comes in, more fumigation activity happens during the spring season, and then it tapers off the rest of the year in comparison. And so we really kind of want to make sure we understand what's happening and with those permit conditions, and really look at that. That's one, I think, the primary purposes of the monitoring. But we do plan to post that data and make that available online.
And may I just ask, though, you're just still talking about a single one monitor, correct?
At this stage, yes, that is what we're looking at. The plume that we see for these two facilities is relatively limited, and the one monitor is pretty much ideally situated to really, take a look at what's happening there. It's kind of capturing right at the heart of the plume, and especially with the modeling that's supporting where we expect to see it, and the previous monitoring that we'd seen before, that we think we have a ideally situated monitor right there.
And I just have one last thing, because I'm sure there are many other people that wish to speak, and you've been gracious with your time with me. I'm hearing a lot of not expecting, and it's very speculative to say that. I mean, I would hope there's not expecting. I've heard that from the doctor. And when you've mentioned not expecting. I don't think we know. I think it would be not expecting, but I just would hope that there would be far more consideration for these really innocent, vulnerable community, especially when you have a current situation where notification of any kind is not required. And so that's my last comment for today. I will resend public records regarding the label. And again, respectfully, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Rubina. And I think just to your point about it's expecting but verifying. Like we are continuing with our work. We're going to continue to get data from these facilities to continue verifying. We're trying to tell you what we understand right now, but that our understanding, if it changes, we're going to let everybody know, right? So I think exactly your point. It's not just one time and just not pay attention anymore. We do plan to continue on this work. So thank you. I'm going to continue on because more hands are being raised. Alejandra, I see your hand is raised.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I have a couple questions. So, I'm by the way, I'm sorry, I'm a reporter with Cal Matters. Based on my conversations with other local air regulators throughout California, their permitting process for methyl bromide includes a health risk assessment at the start. Am I correct in understanding that you may require a health risk assessment based on the data that the facilities provide, but none of the facilities that use the methyl bromide have already gone through a health risk assessment? And if that's the case, can you explain why your process is different?
Sure. I think Scott touched on, and I guess I should always preface anytime we have a reporter who asks us a question, I've been trained to say we do have a media office, and we request that, any questions and requests go through our media office, and we can get Nahal in contact with you. But to your question, Scott did talk about the MOU that we have with the Los Angeles County Agricultural Commissioner that followed from state legislation encouraging, streamlining of permitting. And that laid out, who is the permitting agency. And so it's the agricultural commissioner is the one that does the assessment prior to giving any permits.
That's a health risk assessment specifically?
Well, I would defer to the ag commissioner to talk about their permitting process, and they're not right now on the panel, but they will be the one to talk about their permitting process. On the health risk assessment, there's different kinds of health risk assessments that occur in regulatory programs. One of them we actually talked about earlier in the presentation that Scott was talking about for AB 2588. And under that air toxic hotspots program for existing facilities, they go through a series of screening steps, of health risk screening steps. Eventually can lead to a health risk assessment, but there's a series of health risk screening steps in that AB 2588 process. And all of these facilities, we're looking at all of them under that air toxics program, but that's different in some respects than permitting. And permitting sometimes has its own programs for health risk assessments.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Moving on to the next hand I see raised, Sean Kearns.
Hi, good evening. Sean Kearns, Senior Field Representative for Congresswoman Annette Barragan. Thank you for hosting this meeting. one of the new conditions of the permits for these facilities is to lower the maximum daily use of the fumigant. I was wondering if AQMD has an estimated projection of how these recently implemented limits that are capping daily use are going to impact emissions from these two facilities, and more importantly, the public health for the residents and students in the impacted region. And then my second question is regarding the possibility of rural development. I believe the California Department of Pesticide Regulation has some setback requirements for fumigating at certain locations, but that it does not include container fumigation. And the question is, does AQMD have authority to implement setback distances for container fumigation within the SoCal Air Basin? Thank you.
Good questions. On your first question, asking about the new permit limits on the maximum daily use and how that is going to affect emissions from these facilities. To the extent that the maximum daily use, that it's a direct tie to the emissions. And so if they're lower daily use, you would expect lower daily emissions, but that's only if they're actually emitting at the maximum amount. So I think seeing actual usage, we're continuing to look at data, and trying to collect more data on that to see what is actually happening on those emissions. So it's hard to say, I think, exactly at this point in time what will happen. But if there's a lower, it means that the maximum amount would be lower, but actuals every day, I think it's not quite clear just yet. So I don't know just yet. And I'll ask Scott, does that sound right? Because I know you and your team are looking at a lot of that details.
Yeah, I believe at the presentation that CARB hosted, they did present some modeling that the Department of Pesticide Regulation did to look at the impacts sort of before those changes versus after those changes. So that may be a good place to check. There is a map showing before and after in the presentation that was done at CARB, which is posted online.
And the map that we showed, that blue teardrop shape, is that the before or the after?
We showed the before map.
Right. And the after is a smaller blue.
Right. It does get smaller. Yeah.
Okay. And then I think the question you asked about rule development and Department of Pesticide Regulation having setback distances. So for any rule development that South Coast AQMD, if we go down that pathway, it would not be on fumigant usage that is reserved for Department of Pesticide Regulation or the Ag Commissioner or whomever it is that regulates fumigant usage. What we would regulate would be emissions, right? And what is emissions or risk or anything like that once that fumigant is used. So there's sort of the input side and the output side. We would regulate the output side if we ended up doing any rulemaking there. Okay. I'm going to keep going. It's 7:30 right now. We definitely have time to keep going, but I see that there's questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to kind of keep trying to speed through. So I see Ali Hom, your hand is raised.
Ian, thank you. So I just wanted to follow up on the new information that is being provided today and just was hoping for a little clarification on sort of what has changed from the initial presentation that was given in January on the number of facilities that were listed and reported to the community and what new facilities have been added. I think you mentioned regions, and I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss all of the new facilities that were being included in the sort of inventory. And also wanted to clarify, are these all facilities that use methyl bromide and also have exceeded protective health thresholds, or is it just additional facilities that are using methyl bromide? Just wanted to understand sort of that information. I have two other questions too, but I don't know if you would like to just answer that one initially.
Yeah, Scott, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. So on the map, we show 18 facilities. Those are the same facilities that are in the table on the slide after the map. And most of them do use methyl bromide. I believe 16 of the 18 use methyl bromide, but not all of them could potentially have impacts on the local community. So we looked at their usage data, their proximity to nearby residents and businesses, and then also meteorology to figure out, what are the potential for impacts on the local community. We've identified 6 of those facilities, 2 of which we know a lot about, Ag Fume and SP Fume in West Long Beach, but 4 additional facilities that could have potential offsite impacts. And on that map, that's the orange triangle.
Okay. And for those facilities, I think during the first presentation, there was a discussion around some of the facilities had doors open and there were other kind of standard practices that weren't being complied with. Is that the case for these new facilities as well? Is there any information on that as to sort of how they're operating and whether there is compliance with operating conditions at these facilities?
I think we're still looking at that. So I don't think that we have information, unless Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we have all the same level of information we have for the first 2 facilities as we have for the rest of the universe yet. This is kind of a status update. We're still collecting information.
I guess my next question is just around what is the process for installing additional monitors? I think we've heard a lot of concern around just this new information, and I think for good reason, hope that there will be more monitoring and investigation for these facilities. So I would really urge AQMD to consider installing more monitors. I know that there is currently 1 monitor that's capturing emissions traveling downwind, but I do hope, I think it would really be a missed opportunity not to install more monitors and just to make sure that we're tracking this carefully. I guess that's just something I wanted to share. And just to follow up to that as well, for the health risk assessment, it sounds like there's a plan for an initial screening, but just based on the initial information, the fact that there were facilities that were not closing doors, I think it is pretty standard practice to have a double seal and make sure that there is not exposure in the surrounding area. So it makes, I think, a lot of sense to move forward and taking a really proactive measure and doing a health risk assessment, and even having facilities, covering this additional analysis, even if, it doesn't, maybe there is some kind of step that you'd need to go through to get it funded through AQMD. I'm wondering, is it possible to just move forward with a more protective health risk assessment and ask for facilities to cover that, just considering there was a violation and kind of standard operating procedures?
I will say with the health risk assessments, if a facility is required to do one, then they're required to pay for it and conduct it themselves. And then AQMD reviews it to make sure that it's accurate and follows standard practices. So that would be something that the facility would be required to do if they're told to do an HRA. But we are looking at that. We're trying to go through that as quickly as we can to get to that decision point for all these facilities, and it's going to be different decisions probably for each facility as Scott has laid out. So, okay, I still see some hands raised. Ali, did you have other comments?
I don't want to take up more time. I can follow up later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Next, I see Fernando, you have your hand raised and you haven't spoken yet. Go for it. Oh, Fernando just dropped your hand. Give you one more chance. If you wanted to unmute yourself and comment or ask a question, go ahead. Okay, so might have been an accidental hand. If you do have a question, go ahead and raise your hand again, and we'll come back to you. I see another hand up from someone who hasn't spoken yet. Linda Cleveland, your hand is raised. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Linda Cleveland, and I worked
with environmental issues with the Watts Clean Air and Energy Committee from Watts. And you guys are talking about how the contaminants are released into the air. So have you given thought to whatever's in the air is going to go into the soil and into our water system? So what type of testing is being done to see if any of those areas are being contaminated?
At this stage, we have not looked at any potential methyl bromide intrusion into soil or into water. It's a gaseous pollutant. Some other pollutants like metals, they do deposit, and it would be expected to get onto soils. I think typically we don't expect that with gases, but we haven't looked at that at all for our current efforts.
And we have
I'm not sure if another agency has, but I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, we have something in LA which they call chemtrails. And so that's chemicals being dropped from the air into the community. And since a lot of people are doing home gardenings now, would that come under your purview for chemicals that are being released into the air?
We typically look at, stationary sources of pollution, sort of ground-based stationary sources that release emissions into the air, or other, mobile sources that, things driving around or that kind of thing. That's typically where we look at pollutants of concern for what people actually breathe.
And so there's a possibility that some of these contaminants are being inhaled by humans and that it could possibly cause health issues.
The concern is for methyl bromide and other fumigants that, yeah, there are times that, or there is concern that at high enough levels they could cause health effects. But what we're trying to present is at what levels are we seeing so far, and what information do we have? Am I getting that right, Dr. Quick?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the question maybe for this one might be trying to understand the exposure pathway for methyl bromide. And I think, as Ian mentioned, that's largely when we think about how this could potentially, the exposure to a human would be through inhalation, so breathing in, versus some of the other that you mentioned. There are certain things that could deposit into soil, but for methyl bromide, what we're concerned about here is an exposure pathway through breathing it in.
Okay, and the monitor that you guys have set up, what is the distance that it does it collects its data? Because with the high winds that we've been having here lately, those contaminants could be spread for a distance. Do you have any data on that?
The frequency that the monitor is actually collecting data. I believe right now we're collecting, or that's hourly data that is being collected, and then that can get averaged over longer periods of time as well. But the data is hourly.
Thank you.
And the distances of where that monitor is relative to the sources, that's on some of the slides. You can see the distances on there.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your questions. Okay, I see right now the hands that are still raised, or the hands that are raised from the audience are people who've asked questions before. So I'm going to go turn now to the Q&A. So people have been typing in some questions in the Q&A. I'm actually going to go through those and we'll circle back to anybody who has their hand raised after that. So the first question I see in the Q&A is from Cynthia Babich asking, when were these permit changes made, since the emissions seem to be on the rise? Scott, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the permit changes were made with the Ag Commissioner, I believe at the end of 2024, and that's because their permits get renewed annually on the calendar year. So they made those permit changes to get them enshrined in their 2025 permit.
Okay. Thank you. Next question is from Whitney. Methyl bromide is banned globally and alternatives exist. Why isn't that being explored here? not fumigating during school hours isn't enough. People go on walks, people play or do activities outside of their home, so they're still being exposed outside of school hours. I think these are some of the questions and comments that we've heard from previous speakers. I think we, said that we would go back and talk to other agencies about alternatives. We heard Rubina mentioned, methyl bromide and thinking about it globally. So I think we've covered all of these already. So appreciate the question and comment there. Next one from Desi Salgado. What level or kind of personal protective equipment are workers required to wear at these fumigation facilities? That's not something we really regulate. I think at the last meeting, there was some discussion about certain kinds of, it's called PPE, that workers have, but I think that's not really, we don't really look at the on-site workers. That's really for other agencies. So I think I might defer to or point to other agencies to talk to about that kind of PPE. And that I suspect it might vary from facility to facility depending on the usage. So, okay, I'm going to keep going. Next question is from A. Mingus. For the companies that are required to submit data per the air toxic hotspots program, how are their data audited for accuracy? Scott, can you take that one?
Yeah, so there's data that comes to us in all different forms. There's initial data, there's air toxics inventory reports, health risk assessments, all different types of reports. So we look at everything very closely. We cross-reference with other data sources. We look at potential permits that they have, cross-reference those sources, look at monitoring data. When they do computer modeling, we rerun those computer model runs internally and make sure we get the same answer. So there's a lot of evaluation. We don't trust anything at face value. We validate it all internally to make sure everything is correct.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. Next question from Mary. At the beginning of your presentation, I believe you said there were 3 facilities. What is the 3rd facility? And I think when this question came in, I saw, Scott, you were talking about the Title V facilities. Can you talk about the Title V facilities?
Yeah, so so we showed 18 facilities on our map. 3 of those are permitted by South Coast AQMD because they're large enough to be considered Title V facilities. And I may want to hand that over to Jason for any more details about that. But the remainder of them, the 15 other facilities, are permitted by the LA County Agricultural Commissioner.
Thank you, Scott. I'm Jason Aspel, Deputy over Engineering and Permitting here at South Coast. Title V is just the federal permitting program for large sources of emissions. So after a facility reaches a certain threshold, it goes into the federal permitting system, which we still maintain permitting for and have limits for, separate permits for, separate than the County Ag Commissioner's office.
Okay. I think one thing we'll look at too is if we can point to the rows of and the table that we provided, I think on slide 16, I think we have marked on there which ones are the Title V facilities, I believe. I think we have a footnote on there with a little double plus mark that shows which ones are the Title V facilities. Is that right, Scott?
I think you're right. I'm just confirming that now.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to go to the next question. Someone asking, do you have any other office hour times? The times that we have are working hours for many people. Indeed, they are. I think one thing that we can do is if you have other questions, you want to dialogue with us some more, we do have contact information we can show. Can we actually show that slide again, slide 20? pull up the contact information. So if anybody wanted to find another time that's more suitable, reach out probably to Sarah Reese or Lisa Tanaka to schedule a time that works for you all. So we have the contact information there. Okay. Next question from Alejandra, and I'm not sure if this is the same Alejandra that asked earlier from CalMatters. Can you clarify the specific responsibility and authority that AQMD and the CAC each have under the MOU? I think I'd probably just refer to the specific MOU itself, because there's a lot of detail that's in there, and so I think we just point to the document itself and let it speak for itself. If there's follow-up questions, feel free to reach back. Unless there's anybody else here who wants to take that question. Sorry.
I can give a quick summary.
Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Barbara.
So the MOU was entered into in 1996 as a result of the passage of a law in California that provided an option for a permit applicant to request that all environmental permits be consolidated into one permit, and that one agency would be sort of like the lead agency called the Consolidated Permit Agency, and all the other agencies would be called participating agencies and provide their information to that Consolidated Permitting Agency. And so back at this time, the primary responsibility for the permitting of these types of facilities was with the county agricultural commissioners, and so the Air District agreed to allow the county agricultural commissioner to be the consolidated permit agency, which meant that they would be the primary point of contact with the facility. They would seek out input from the Air District whenever they had a permitting situation. We would provide them with our recommended conditions and any data that was relevant to that. And then we would become part of the consolidated permit rather than having a separate AQMD permit. And as was mentioned earlier, there are Title V facilities here operating fumigation operations. Those are not included in the MOU, and the MOU only applies to methyl bromide.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. All right, I'm going to keep going here. Next question from Siva Aguilar. Are there any actions taken for those 50 houses that are by ag and SP fume? I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. Actions taken for those 50 houses. So at this point, I think what we're trying to do is lay out the actions here of what, we as AQMD plan to do moving forward, recognizing that the modeling shows that there could be impacts to those 50 homes from the combined impact from these two facilities. So we're laying out what those potential actions are that we're looking to take. So I think we've talked through that through the presentation already. But if there's specific follow-up questions, please feel free to raise your hand and we can go through it. I'm going to move on to the next question, Ellie Sacco. Where can we find the research information done by your agency on the health risk assessments of these fumigants? Scott, can you talk about that? And I think a lot of it isn't quite available online just yet, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think this may be referring to the health science underlying the toxicity of these fumigants. I'm not sure if that's the case, then the OEHA website would be the best place to go. But there are no full health risk assessments available for these facilities. They have not been conducted yet. We've done some preliminary health risk screening to identify which facilities are subject to additional requirements. Those facilities may be required to submit a health risk assessment, but those are not yet available.
I think one thing we can do, we are still building our website where we're going to be able to provide, information as it comes along. One thing I'm writing a note that we can provide a link to OWIHA's specific documents, the technical reports they have on the toxicity of these fumigants like methyl bromide. We'll have a lot of other information that we're going to post there too, but we'll put a note to ourselves on that. Okay. Next question, Michael Watkins is asking, can you show the map that is being referred to? I unfortunately don't know when he sent that question in. So we have a series of slides with different maps that are in there. So I apologize. I'm not sure what that was referring to. So we're going to keep moving. Next question is from Nathan. I imagine this is out of the scope of the work done at AQMD, but have there been samples done on soil? I know this chemical is also used on soil, so I'm curious if the use of this chemical has seeped into the soil near the houses and schools, soil situated near the facility. We have not done any soils testing. I'm not aware if there are any other agencies or anybody else that has done any soils testing in this area, but we have not done any soils testing. Next question from Ellie Sacco. What type of doctor is Dr. Quick?
So I am a physician, have a background in public health preventive medicine, MPH in environmental health, and also addiction medicine, which is a bit less relevant here, but I am a medical doctor.
That. Next question is, I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow up. All right, sorry, there we go. Next question from Cynthia Babbage. What would be implemented worst case scenario, and what would that scenario look like? I'm not exactly sure. Worst case scenario, it depends on what a lot of people would describe it. I would say in general for our air toxics program, there are instances where we have done monitoring and we find levels of a pollutant that exceed South Coast AQMD thresholds. And what we have done is we've established thresholds at different levels, and we take different actions depending on which threshold has been exceeded. And so we do have our highest threshold is when we have accelerated risk reduction. We call it a potentially high risk level facility, and we start accelerating the timelines for everything a facility is going to do to reduce risk to protect public health, because the levels are so high that accelerated action is needed. In the instance here, as a comparison to what we're talking about here, that would be like a hazard index from a single facility of 5. And remember, Scott talked about these ratios before, and that we find from these 2 facilities combined, that hazard index is about 1.5. I think that's what you said, Scott. It's about 1.5 from 2 facilities. Whereas we take that sort of much more extreme route when it's an HI of 5. So we're well below that sort of much higher threshold that we've used in other instances, looking at what does that impact on human health. So I hope that provides an answer for you. Another request for the map. I'm sorry, Michael, I'm not sure which map you wanted us to show. If you wanted to raise your hand, we can and say which map you're curious about, but I'm not sure which one.
I think we posted the link to the presentation in one of Michael's questions. So you can click on the link and scroll through the presentation. It's available online.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Next question, Antonio Ruiz, are monitors placed at schools or near schools, and how often is data collected? So we do have the monitor that's here that is very, very close to Hudson. It's one property away, or 1.5 properties, depending on how you look at it, but it's right there. And that is collected hourly data, and that's posted online. Next question from Robina Sewell. How often does AQMD inspect the fumigation facilities, and where are the reports of the inspections, and how may the public please review the inspection reports? Thank you. I can take a first stab at this, but if anybody else here wants to weigh in, please do. We don't permit these facilities, so we don't send inspectors to these facilities. The inspections would be occurring from the permitting agency, and that would be the Los Angeles County Agricultural Commissioner. We have done some site visits to just find out some more information about these facilities, but that's not really an inspection, I think, the question that you're asking about here. So, okay, the last question in the Q&A. The questions being submitted through the Q&A are not being posted in the chat until after they're answered. This is making it difficult to keep track of what the question was. Okay, I'm trying to read the questions as we go along so people can hear, but if there are additional questions, feel free to raise your hand or to put them in the Q&A. We can go ahead and do that. At this point, I'm going to go back to the hands that are raised. 3 previous speakers had their hands raised, so I'm going to go back to them. First, Ali Ham. Go ahead. Ali, did you have, or is that a legacy hand? Might be a legacy hand. I'll ask Therrell. You have your hand raised?
My hand is raised.
Go for it.
Okay. The 2 of the questions I had have already been answered. Did they put the big super duper fans inside the stacks as you said they would?
I'm sorry, what was your question? I want to make sure I heard it. That did they put the new fans in the stacks? Was that your question?
Yeah, at the previous meeting, or one of the meetings we were in talking about this, that we were going to recommend, I don't know if they were already there or what, but in the smokestacks, there would be fans to help push it further out. Did that happen?
That is a good question. I'm going to turn, I see Jason Aspel, you just turned your camera off.
Yes. So the county ag commissioner issued the permits with the requirements for minimum air velocity while they're venting the fumigation activities. That has been done. I verified with the facilities that they're implementing those provisions on the taller stack heights. And that was done around the time of our last community meeting.
So they are the same as they were, or is there improved velocity? You say minimum velocity. So that means nothing changed, correct?
It was established a minimum velocity to make sure that they maintain the parameters that were modeled that Scott was discussing earlier in the presentation, to make sure that was maintained as an accurate picture of what the emissions would be.
Okay, and how often do they clean the smokestacks? And what is done with the waste?
That I am not aware of. We don't handle the waste. Again, this is a gas for methyl bromide, so there's not solids. Produce is brought in, fumigated, and then sent out.
The actual protocols they use. Anyone on your staff observed that? And are the buildings they are stating that they put the containers in to fumigate them? I mean, the produce in, are they airtight? Things like that. Structure, all this is important.
Yes, no, absolutely. These are part of the requirements for the actual protocols that you're referencing. Those are handled by the county ag commissioner. And also, forgive me, I'm blanking on the other federal agency, and if you can think of
USDA.
USDA, thank you very much, who's responsible for those exact protocols.
Okay. And I'm just abbreviate the at least two of the other callers had mentioned more air collectors. And that's two things with that. We need to make sure what the model is saying is happening. And along with that, the health impact reports should have a parameter, at least, in my opinion, 10 to 15 cents above where the teardrop is. If it's no more than to validate the modeling. Because if you have a cold, if you say if it's a hard stop at this point in the modeling, is that a fact? Right now, it's a projection.
I see what you're saying. So is your question, where is the edge of that blue boundary? Is that your question? And like, is there monitoring that can determine where that edge is exactly?
Yes.
Got it. It's an estimation. It's, I think, the best estimation that we can get. Computer modeling is really that best way to do it, especially when looking at long-term averages. And again, remember, these are long-term averages. It's not in any single hour or any single minute. There will be variation.
To me, it would be extremely important if you do a health assessment that you go 10, 15% past that. For that reason alone, to validate what's being stated.
Scott, can you talk a little bit about the modeling itself, just the computer modeling and sort of the conservatism that's built in there, and whether we think that this is really trying to get it exactly precise, or is it a little bit more conservative, not conservative enough? Can you talk on that?
Yeah. So, we realize when any sort of modeling, like, it's not 100% perfect, right? There's uncertainties with it. So with that in mind, there's a lot of conservatism built into the modeling. So kind of whenever we have to make assumptions, we tend to err on the side of, public health protection. So, the modeling isn't designed to get that exact, to the nearest inch, edge of the plume. Not that you're saying that, but it does build in a lot of conservatism so that we can be pretty confident that really that, risk wouldn't exceed 1 as you get closer to the facility. So essentially, like,
I got that. I understand that perfectly. But I'm just saying to validate it, because we are talking about sensitive receptors here, to make sure that we're not missing anything. That's the whole purpose with asking for the additional air monitors.
Okay.
We want to make sure in this particular case that we get the maximum protection possible.
Appreciate that request, and Daryl, I think that follows on with some of the other requests we've gotten on the air monitoring from others as well. There are resource limitations on how much monitoring can be done everywhere throughout the district and specific communities, as well as just in specific instances. Where can a monitor actually be placed for a year-long period, getting the siting location and all that sort of thing, and the kind of instrumentation that's needed. So there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to monitoring. Definitely hear the request that you and others are making here. But I think what we're trying to do is provide the best information that we can right now with everything that we have, that this is the best information we can provide right now. But we've heard the request, so we'll.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to say you were sitting on the information. I was just saying this is something going forward we should be looking at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see here. I see Sylvia, your hand came up again. There you are.
When we're going back up.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I just again want to just lift up the concerns around the health risk assessment, and I feel that it is something that that should be explored further, and that I think that it would be in this case the responsibility of the facilities to cover those costs of doing their business when it has impacts on their neighbors. And then aside from that, I also wanted to ask about one of the solutions that is being proposed, which is to fumigate outside of school hours, which is good. However, in thinking about what the times at which fumigation happened in previous years, especially when there were high levels, they did happen outside of school hours, but also thinking about the nighttime or like evening hours fumigation when we have an inversion layer that when it is colder temperatures, that it pushes down closer to the ground and closer to where people are, gases. And you've mentioned multiple times that methyl bromide is a gas. And as we know from other kinds of pollutants in this particular neighborhood, that gases are present, especially from diesel pollution. But just thinking about methyl bromide, why would this be the solution to fumigate during hours when we know that the meteorology or these colder temperatures would actually bring the gases closer to the ground where people are at?
Yeah, I think I'll ask Scott to touch a little bit on the sort of the atmospheric phenomenon that you're describing. But one of the things that we do know is that the monitor that is there is capturing that already, right? We're already capturing, looking at hour by hour, we're seeing that sort of that pattern of the nighttime usage matching with the nighttime highs, and it is capturing that already. But Scott, do you want to talk a little bit about some of what Sylvia was just mentioning?
Yeah, so you're right that we tend to see less dispersion in the evening hours. Things sort of calm down and stagnate. So that is, that's definitely, an issue that you don't, that methyl bromide doesn't spread out as readily. But from what we hear from the ag commissioner, there are some constraints on when they can fumigate. So apparently the U.S. Department of Agriculture is like very involved in the fumigation process and inspecting them, and they have certain constraints on when they can be there to inspect the fumigation process. So I think there's a bit more involved in them kind of picking what time the fumigation occurs. But I do want to say that the modeling that's been done and the measurements at the station do take into account the fact that the fumigation does occur in the evening hours.
Okay. I see, Ellie, your hand is still up, so I'll ask one more time if your hand is meant to be there, or was that a legacy hand? Okay, we're going to go ahead and lower your hand, and if you have a question, go ahead and ask it. Alejandra, see your hand is raised, and I'm not sure if that's a legacy or if that's a re-raising.
Hi, thank you. No, it's I appreciate you calling on me again. This is Alejandra again from Cal Matters. Are you able to compare the usage amount of methyl bromide at the 4 new facilities you're highlighting today with the 2 in West Long Beach? Or even one of the new facilities, just to get an idea of the difference there. And I know you said you're collecting more usage data for 2023 and 2024. What specifically will you be looking for in that data? Is there like a specific usage amount that would trigger I guess like your decision to do more monitoring, or is that off the table?
So I'll point to first that we do have a table, slide 16, and I think the link is in the Q&A. And it's also on our website, on our calendar. You can go and find the presentation slides there. So slide 16, if we wanted to pull it up, we could. It shows the usage for all of the, I think you said 4 facilities and 2 facilities. It's 18 facilities.
Oh, there are 2 are there already. Okay.
Right. And so then we just have all the usage there, so you can make anybody can make whatever comparisons they want there. But what we've looked at here is you also see the categories, and that categories looks at not just usage, but I think Scott laid out, proximity of the facility to, different receptors, sensitive receptors, et cetera, and just sort of everything that we know about that facility tells us, okay, whether or not we expect offsite impacts, is it, what are the kinds of pollutants, fumigants that are used, and then what are those next potential steps? And so you see that there, those orange triangles are the ones where we think that there's going to be additional follow-up information that we're going to be needing from these facilities. Depending on that information that we collect, they might move further along in this process in the air toxics program.
And the decision to do more monitoring, what will that be based on? I know you said it's like resource intensive. Is it still something you'd consider?
I think we're taking a lot of comments back right now, and there's a lot of things we're going to consider. I don't think that there's any decisions right now as far as monitoring. I do know that we are planning to continue the monitor here, and that is, what we're looking at in the immediate future, because we do see that is really ideally located. But for anything beyond that, we're collecting comments. We're going to have to look at a lot of information before any decision is made there.
Is it safe to say, because I'm looking at the chart here, is it, so like the number 1, for instance, says the 15,000 pounds in total usage compared to one of the West Long Beach ones is 4,000 pounds. Is it safe to say there's more of a risk with a higher usage amount in terms of health impacts to the public?
I don't think that we can say that at this time. I think there's a lot more information that would be needed to determine what is a potential risk from these facilities. That's why the air toxics program is built the way it is. Take in a lot of information, and then determine what is that potential risk to the surrounding community that is specific to that facility. It sounds like you also have a lot of specific questions. I encourage you to get in contact with our media liaison, Nahal Magharabi, and I think that might be a good path.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely will.
Okay, great. I see there's more questions in the Q&A, and I see one that I'm going to go back to. All the hands, I don't see any other hands up. 2 more questions in the Q&A. I'll read the first one, and I'm really glad it's asked because I might have said something confusing, so I want to clear that up. Question from Rabina Sewell. Ian, tonight you and Scott mentioned a hazard index of 5 for one of the facilities. What are the hazard indices for all the facilities, please? And thank you. So the example I gave before of a facilities with 5, a hazard index of 5, that would not be any one of the 18 facilities that we're presenting here. We have not determined a specific hazard index under the air toxics program for any one of these 18 facilities as of yet. That is something that comes along after going through further assessment. What I was describing was a general process overall, what we would do in the air toxic hotspots program for any facility that's covered by that throughout the entire region, not just fumigation facilities. So that was the comparison I was making. It's more of a hypothetical. There are other facilities that are not fumigation facilities that have gone through that potentially high risk level, but they're not fumigation. They're a different kind of pollutant. Okay, and then the next question asking, since the last meeting, the levels of methyl bromide was elevated, and now you said that now it is 1.5 higher. Why did you not stop them? As a resident, what can we do or where can we go for help if you as AQMD has seen this problem and just giving us info? As a mother with a child with asthma, I'm really worried about it. So I'll take the first part, and Dr. Quick, I might ask you to take the next part. So the first part about levels are elevated. One thing I do want to point out is some of the monitoring data that we showed before. It shows seasonality, that there is sort of a peak season, and we are seeing sort of that peak season that we're entering into right now during spring. So there is an expectation based off of the business practices of these facilities that there would be some increase. But so far what we've seen is a slight decrease from last year. But we're month to month, we're kind of going into that peak season. But the question about health effects and a mother, with a child with asthma, I don't know, Dr. Quick, can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, a couple thoughts on that. First of all, one of the potential health effects of methyl bromide is respiratory in nature, and it's generally respiratory irritation. That being said, urge anybody who has concerns specifically about their health or the health of their family members and a child to make sure that you bring any concerns you have to the medical provider that you're working with, because to be able to distinguish from something like an underlying asthma or other lung disease and a potential effect related to an exposure, we can't do that on the level of us talking here. So just want to make sure that, very important to talk with your personal medical provider for your child to answer that specific question.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. I have one more question in the Q&A. Let's see here. I keep hearing questions and answers about what to do with methyl bromide, what hours to release it, how to release it, fans in the smokestacks, etc. This is frustrating because those are band-aids, not solutions. There's a reason this chemical was banned outside of the US. 100% of the focus of AQMD and permitting agencies must be to demand that the companies use available alternatives, period. So Carlos, I appreciate that. I think that I recall you saying that at the very beginning as well. So thank you for reiterating your point. Okay. At this point, we don't have any other questions in the Q&A. I don't see any hands raised. So I think we are, of course, one more hand raised. Ali, go ahead.
Hi, Ian. Sorry, I'm wondering whether there are any additional meetings planned outside the office hours just to make more time to have one-on-one conversations with community members that do want to learn more about the health impacts from methyl bromide and just to better understand what to look out for in terms of exposure, like what types of symptoms people should be aware of, and just making sure we're prioritizing public health information being available to everyone surrounding these facilities. I'm just asking about sort of next steps after the office hours and just, I guess, encouraging more meeting opportunities to make sure this is a conversation that continues moving forward.
Yeah, I'm hearing multiple questions there. So the first one, as far as after office hours, or if there are other times that are better, I recommend people to contact Sarah Reese at the contact information that's in the slides, and we can schedule other times that make sense for people. So I think that makes sense. As far as any future community meetings, we don't have anything planned right now. I think we still need to collect a lot more information. But if we, see that there's really a need that more information comes to light that's really important to get out to the community, we definitely would be scheduling that. We do plan to provide information on our website, and once we build that out, have monitoring data, have results from the air toxic hotspots program as that becomes available, other information, provide that on the web and provide some updates through there. But I also heard one of your questions asking about what are the kinds of health effects one would see, and wanting to get that kind of information out. I don't know, Dr. Quick, can you talk at all about, what are the kinds of health effects one might see from these kinds of exposures?
Yeah, so I briefly touched on it before, but let me quickly go over some of what we are thinking about as potential health effects of exposure to methyl bromide. And generally, those are going to be in the effects to the central nervous system and respiratory. As I mentioned before, that might be respiratory irritation. The central nervous system, of course, that's like your brain and your nerves throughout your body. And generally what we're talking about with that is headache, dizziness, nausea, and so forth. I think the important thing to think about with this is those are all symptoms that are quite I'd say common and have different causes. So once again, important for individuals who are worried about an individualized exposure or symptom that they might be having, really important for them to be talking to their personal medical provider to be able to kind of sort through on that individual level. But in general, when we're talking about methyl bromide, it's central nervous system and respiratory effects.
I think it would be great just to, I know there already is a plan for posting this information on kind of one portal and just having one pagers. And I think that's probably already starting, but just making sure that it's really helpful to hear that, Dr. Quick. Thank you. And I obviously very concerning as well. So I think making that really accessible to everyone and having one pagers that identify like all use sites and monitoring sites and areas where monitoring might be effective if there is monitoring that's expanded. I think just having that information available would be just really helpful overall. And I don't mean to draw on the conversation, but I think I have more questions. I'll save them for office hours. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for those questions. And one pagers is a good suggestion as well. All right. So at this point, I don't see any more in the Q&A. Don't think we have any hands raised. You all have spent a lot of time here tonight and really appreciate everybody's interest and engaging with us. We really do appreciate it. I think it's been a very productive dialogue we've had tonight. So thank you again for sharing your thoughts with us. Next opportunities, again, our office hours tomorrow. Can we put that slide back up just in case anybody wants to look at those QR codes and find the time? So we have tomorrow. This is slide 19. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. and then Tuesday at 10 a.m. And again, if those times don't work, feel free to contact Sarah Reese or Lisa Tanaka, and we can schedule some other time to have some follow-up. Okay, with that, thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate your time. Have a good rest of your evening. Happy spring. Today's the first day of spring. So thank you all. Appreciate it. And thanks for everybody here for helping to pull this together. Have a good night.